it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. I have a fun video all about torn paper today because we are all about keeping it simple this week, and I have been enjoying these techniques and thought I would share them with you because card making doesn't need to be complicated and complex. We are going to keep it really simple. All you need is some cardstock, which you are going to do your torn paper techniques on. I prefer to use the Tombow Mono Removable Adhesive. This is my absolute favorite. It has the perfect amount of hold and stick, but rubs off so easily with your finger, just up and down, and it is gone. Then you will also need some ink of any description. I am pretty much just using Distress Oxides today, but I'm going to show you a few different techniques of how you can use them and even some watercolors as well. Then I am just using some copy paper. And all you do, of course, for the torn paper edge is just rip. You can rip it a few times. This is plain old copy paper, very, very thin. Any scrap paper, copy paper is going to work perfectly for this technique. Of course, you could use, rip some masking paper as well, and that will already have the adhesive on it, the temporary adhesive for you, but just as cheap for me is to use plain old copy paper. Sometimes I like the rip that I get. Other times I tend to kind of pick away some of those little pieces and adjust it until I do like the rip that I get. Now here is where I'm going to start off, and all I'm going to do is use a little bit just on the edge there. Now I do find it tricky without this. I prefer to have the adhesive. I just find it much easier. So for me it's worthwhile putting it on there, but if you just wanted to hold the cardstock in place or hold your torn paper in place, you could give that a go too. The other thing you could use is if you have some wider washi tape, then that would work too. I would suggest that you kind of put it on your clothing a little bit first, a time or two, so that you lose a little bit of that stick, because we really don't want it ripping your project once you have done the inking. Now, first one, plain and simple. All I'm doing is putting down a little bit of, this happens to be scattered straw Distress Oxide ink. I'm just using a finger dauber, and it's kind of going a bit lighter as it goes out towards the edge. This is a very, very simple inking. I have made barely any effort to keep this one kind of smooth, and yet it looks pretty good once we have taken the torn edge off and once we turn it into a card. Now this one here we have to be quick about. We are going to make this watercolor, and I'm still only using copy paper. Copy paper is the thinnest paper. It is kind of computer paper, printer paper, copy paper, very, very thin. I have got a little bit of worn lipstick, Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to pop a little bit of this down onto an acrylic block, and then I use my fine mister just to add a little bit of water to it. Then I do add a brief little bit of water over top of my panel as well. I'm going to work quickly here because copy paper was not made to get wet. And I still want a really crisp, clean edge here. So I quickly go over it with my paintbrush, and then I am just going to do some little strokes acrossways. It kind of has that beautiful paintbrush look in it, that strokey look, and I like that. I like that it gets a little bit lighter towards the right hand side. I don't want to fuss and fiddle with this too much, and then I'm going to take my paper off pretty fast, and I still have that beautiful torn edge there, and I absolutely love this. So we didn't have to use watercolor cardstock or anything masking, but you do have to be quick about it. Then I just kind of keep going. You can reuse your masks. I'm going to reuse some in a little minute, but if I switch up colors, generally when I'm using Distress Oxide inks, I pretty much just get a new mask because I don't want to have any of the colors kind of blending into each other and coming off of the top of the mask. But I just add a little bit of adhesive. Don't even have to make it perfectly go all the way along, but I think just in general, a few little bits and pieces, and it stays in place nicely. For this one here, I'm going to do some blending of different colors. I have 3 different pinks: picked raspberry, worn lipstick, and spun sugar. And I'm just going to work my way. I kind of made so that this one has probably almost just over half, about 2/3 or so of my card is exposed. You can choose whether you want to do kind of a nice little skinny bit, or you want to do a kind of bigger portion of your card that will be inked up. And so I did a whole range of these. Again, I just like using finger daubers. I find this one of the most handy tools in my whole card making. I use finger daubers over top of ink blenders, mainly because I don't like changing the foam pads on the ink blenders. I get ink all over my hands and things, and I'm not a big fan of that. Unless you kind of have one for each color and they just live on there, I don't love changing over the foam pads. I do use them, and I do love them for bigger projects, but if I can get away with using my finger daubers, these are my go-to, and I definitely recommend them as a good investment for your craft room. I tend to keep pretty much like a couple of colors per color family. You can see I actually only have one red one there. I have 2 oranges, but I do share these ink daubers between different colors, even though sometimes I kind of get a little collection. I've got 4 or so of each color. Pretty much I try to have a light, a medium, and a dark for each finger dauber, and I just kind of you know, scrub off the excess little bit of color on a scrap piece of paper before I dip into a new ink pad. Then for this one, I'm going to reuse this mask that we used in the very beginning, and this is on a card base, straight onto a card base, and I'm going to create a ripped torn paper edge as an entire frame. So I'm going around all 4 sides here. This removable adhesive is fantastic because you can use it time and time again. I can pull it up and it still has the perfect amount of stick when I put it down each time. There is no bleeding, or, you know, none of the paper comes away, even though this is just copy paper. So this creates a really cute little frame, very organic. There's kind of no way to get this wrong, and I like that look. So we are going to turn these ones into cards. Now you've seen enough of the ink blending. There is obviously a whole lot of ways that we can go about this, but I want to turn these into some cards so that I can give you some ideas for that too. This is one of my favorites, the Dainty Blossoms Pinkfresh Studio standalone die set. This one is also worth the investment. I know I have used this in so many videos, but it has the perfect kind of foliage and flowers, and there are some stems and stalks and little all sorts of different things in here, and I know I use this one time and time again because it is such good value. And I feel like I've been reaching for it a lot. I feel like it's been in a lot of my most recent videos, but it just is one of those sets that I reach for time and time again. It's actually quite old now. It's been out for a little while, but it is still available because it is such a favorite. Now I have just run that through my die cutting machine, got out a couple of the inside pieces, poked them all out with my little pokey tool, and then I have my happy birthday here. This is from Alina Crafts, and this is one of those ones that I have kept because I love. This is, I've just cut this out, the background out, the shadow in some vellum, and then I have just cut out the normal words in some white plain cardstock. I'm using some mint tape, some low tack tape, to kind of mask off half of the words, and I'm just going to switch this around and use some of the exact same color. I think this is the spun sugar one, in fact, rather than the worn lipstick, but just kind of one shade lighter, and ink this up. Then I take them all out of their little spots and take out all of the little middle pieces. I like to keep them in their background piece of paper that I die cut them on when I'm inking them, because I'm less likely to kind of crumple up the paper and bend it and get it creased when I'm ink blending on it. Then I did put some stick it adhesive, which is just a very thin double-sided adhesive on the back of those letters when I was running them through the die cutting machine, and that way I have no fuss about sticking them down to the vellum, and I can just pop them straight on without any liquid glue or anything like that. Dry adhesive is my favorite way to adhere things to vellum. I will avoid using liquid glue as much as I kind of can. It's okay sometimes, especially in spots where it won't be seen, but when things like this, I prefer just the instant tack on vellum. And also, you don't want the vellum to crinkle up and things with the moisture from liquid glue, depending on the quality of your vellum. I don't find that the Lawn Fawn vellum I use does crinkle when light moisture is added. However, it depends how much you use, of course. I prefer to use the Lawn Fawn one because I can die cut it, I can heat emboss with it, it is heat resistant, which is fabulous, and it means I can do all my techniques with just one type of vellum. Then I have got my little blossom here, my little bloom, and this is going to sit really nicely behind my sentiment. This card is pretty simple. I mean, there's not a lot to it. However, I really like this look. I really like the torn paper edge. It gives it kind of a nice little background effect there. I like the simplicity of the colors. We're barely introducing any more than just the one color. And yet the little bit of vellum for the background of the sentiment really helps it stand out off the background that is white as well. I just used some of the liquid glue, the Ranger Multimedium in the matte finish, and a little sponge dauber to pop some glue on the back of my really dainty die there. You could also use the stickered adhesive on the back of that when I was running it through the die cutting machine, but I think I was using a die cut that I previously had cut and just popped to the side to use another time. I did pop some foam tape up on the very back of the card front so that it popped off the card base just a little bit. And then I'm going to use some glue so that I can pop down the sentiment only behind the solid white cardstock. I don't go into the vellum bit, and I don't put very much glue on because I don't want it to seep into the sides where the vellum is as well. After having a block on there for 30 seconds to make sure everything is adhered down, this is my first card done and dusted for the day. So moving on to the next one. This one is going to be a little bit similar, so I'm skipping through this pretty fast, but I just wanted to show you that you can bring in different elements. So this is the one where we did the blending of the 3 pinks, and I have cut this panel down to be 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Again, this gives it a really nice little border around the outside on my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. I had already cut this gold leaf from the Curvy leaves die set as well. That is one of these two, in fact, the Curvy leaves and the Dainty blossoms are 2 of my all-time favorites. I would say maybe the Curvy leaves one would sneak in front, but I use these 2. These are my foliage, my kind of flowers foliage go-tos. That's my dies. I love them. And so for this one, I'm popping a white die cut on the background. I want to make sure not to get out too much excess glue there because the oxides would react with the moisture from the glue. They are water reactive inks. I'm going to pop a little bit of liquid glue on the back of this gold die cut here. It's really just die cut out of some white cardstock, and then I have heat embossed it with gold. And I'm going to layer these ones up they look pretty similar in the end, these 2 cards, but I really like this one, so I thought I would share it with you too. And then the last card that I'm going to share with you is going to be the one with the frame, and it's going to be completely different. And it very nearly sent me off on a whole big tangent about where this video was actually meant to be heading. Now this is a little hack here. I have a piece of cardstock, that happy word there, and I die cut it with stickered adhesive on both the front and the back of your piece of cardstock. So I have a happy die cut on the front of the vellum, and I have a happy die cut on the back of the vellum. The one on the back has stickered adhesive on both sides. That way it can adhere to the back side of the vellum and down onto my card. I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but it works well. It means I can avoid using liquid glue altogether. Now here is my little frame, my torn frame, and I'm going to show you 2 really fun techniques here that I could do my own video about all together, and that's unfortunately why this video is so long. So please forgive me for that. I really do apologize, and I maybe should have split this video up and kind of gone off on this tangent anyway, but here we are, we're off. I'm going to pop this one in my stamping platform, and this is from the Tim Holtz Illustrated Gardens stamp set. And a technique I'm going to use today is kind of a faux watercolor technique, because if you're like me, I couldn't paint to save my life. So I'm just going to use my finger daubers, and sometimes I need to get out my ink pads if they don't have enough residual ink on the finger daubers. However, sometimes I'm just able to use what's left on there, and then every color I do, I don't clean it off in between, but I tend to just do one color at a time. I don't really know why I tend to do that. I kind of like focusing on one color and whether I need to add in a little bit of shading or a little bit more ink or whatever I need to do. But I mean, you could probably do them all at the same time and then close the door as well. Now I am just adding the ink. At this point it is just the ink, because I want to show you something really cool when we get this inking done. I am adding a couple of different shades here to the leaves, and I just kind of keep stamping until I feel like I have what I want. And that is the beauty of using a stamping platform, although you definitely don't have to. I do find that this makes it easier for me at least. I am going to do some sort of orangey colours up the top, just one, and then stamp this down as well. Now I'm going to pop this out, and I just want to show you, even with the ink that is left on my stamp here, all I'm doing is taking out the card and putting in a fresh piece of cardstock. I take my fine mister, it's really fine and it gives the most even long spray, and I just put a little bit of water on there and then stamp this down onto my cardstock, give it a second so it can transfer, and then look at this gorgeous image that we get. This is just the leftover ink that is already on there, and I mean, that looks stunning to me. So I nearly went on a whole big tangent about going down sort of the road of that, but anyway, I'm trying to kind of stay on task. Now I'm going to show you this kind of whole process here rather than editing it out. All I did was add a little bit more water on there, and I'm going to take a paper towel and kind of just get rid of any of the leftover ink as well. And at this point I knew that I wanted to add the kind of watercolor, faux watercolor look to my card front as well that we created just a minute ago. And again, that is the beauty of being able to put it back into the stamping platform exactly where I had it. I can make sure everything lines up. I have the grid on the bottom, so I remember exactly where I kind of put it in, because I kind of always do the same thing every time I put a piece of cardstock in. I pop it into roughly the same place, and then I give it a really light spray with that gorgeous mister that gives that even perfect spray, and then again close it up, give it a minute to kind of sink in, or just sort of actually probably around 10 or so seconds, and then look how that transforms the image. It really brings it to life, it brightens it all up, it just makes it look absolutely gorgeous. So I love doing that final step. So that was only a little fine mist of water on there, and that's what it did. So that was really fun to do. There's one more cool thing I thought I would show you. I want to show you how to create a 3D popped up banner without using any dies or anything like that. So I have a spare strip of cardstock here. In fact, this is a little wider than what I need, so I will trim this down, but I'm just showing you, I use my scrap long pieces. I'm going to colour it with the scattered straw colour because that was what is around the border as well. Now it will look a little bit darker because this is fresher ink and the other ink has had a minute to dry, but when they both dry they will end up looking exactly the same. Then I did use my heat gun to cheat and make sure it dried a little bit so that I could work with it at least. And then I'm going to trim this down. I was just estimating what I would need. I'm going to take this old memory box stamp set. I don't think this one's available anymore, but I was just looking for kind of the right sized happy birthday to go along the front. This is actually going to be for this gorgeous 90-year-old lady. She's having her 90th birthday. And so I just wanted these gorgeous flowers and a gorgeous little banner to go right underneath it. All I'm going to do is take the edges here and bend them down on an angle. Now I am being a little bit careful not to get my fingers in the black ink here because I did not heat set this, so it's not dry yet and it is a pigment ink, so it probably takes a little bit longer to dry than a dye ink would, but I love the crisp stamping from it. Then I bend the ends out a little bit and it kind of is a little bit lower than the happy birthday sentiment level. So you kind of bend down on an angle and then bend out straight again. It is really simple to do. Have a play around with it on a scrap piece of paper first before you do it on your project and you'll get the hang of it, and then you won't need to buy banner dies again. I come along and I just snip a little fishtail in the end of my banner pieces there using my little cutter bee scissors, and then if you want to you can either glue this down all nice and flat on the back if you just want it to be flat, and there will be some dimension provided just with the folds even, but I'm going to add some foam tape in the back there and this will keep it really popped up as well. So just a couple of little pieces of foam tape, and then this is going to go along the front of my card. As I said, the yellows look a little bit different just because one's had longer to dry at the moment, but I promise they will all dry the same. And then my banner was a little bit too long, so I cut it just a little bit shorter, and I love that this was able to be kind of handmade, and I like the look and simplicity of this card too. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. This was a long one. If you could give us a little thumbs up, then it lets YouTube know that you like these types of videos from me, and it also helps me out a lot as a creator. Thank you so much. I will have links to everything in the description box below this video. If you could leave me a comment and let me know which card is your favorite, because I have a hard time choosing with these ones. Usually I'm pretty good at choosing, but these are all my kind of style. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you so much. Bye.